The question for today is how many people speak English in the world? And we will try to give a numerical answer to that question, but the question is more interesting than the answer. Why? Because it raises the problem of what it means to speak a language. To what level do you have to master a language and use it in everyday interactions with the world in order to be identified with that language, or even to have it belong to you, or even to have an influence over its future? That's the interesting part of the question. Let's see. How many people speak English? The easy way to answer it is to add up the countries. Here we go. The United Kingdom, I do it roughly, about 60 million. Put it in. Canada, half that or so, about 30 million. Put them in. Australia, about 20 million. Put them in. And so on. Get the list of countries where you know people speak English, look up the general population, add it up, and what do you get? Well, not very many, until you get to one very big country. Which could that be? The United States, 300 million. Canada, 30. United States, 300 million. Put them in, and it's no surprise that the United States is seen as the dominant, imperialistic perhaps, element in the growth of English and in the future of English. 300 million is a lot of speakers. Add them all up and you might get to around 400 million, a bit more, a bit less. And we could say that's how many people speak English in the world. It's not the most spoken language, obviously, if you operate on that basis. Is that a good estimate? Well, I go to Wikipedia, which is not a banal place to look for this sort of information, and I'm told in 2009 that there are between 309 and 4 million speakers of English. That's a big between, but it's about right. It fits in with what we can get by adding up the countries. I can check a book by David Gradol, The Future of English, second edition 2000, where he gives a figure of 375 speakers of English as their first language, which is roughly in agreement with what we're doing here. The problem, of course, is that when we add up those countries, we can't assume that everyone in those countries has English as their language. Perhaps not as a language they dominate, and certainly not as their first language. You only have to look at the position of Spanish in the United States to realize that many parts of the country are functionally diglossic. The two languages are in existence, are being used for different purposes, and a great percentage of the population has Spanish as its first language. And with immigration, there are many, many more languages being used within the United States as first languages. You cannot assume that English is the language of the United States. It has no official status within the United States. The same is true, though, of most of the other countries. Within the United Kingdom, we can talk about the position of Welsh, the position of Scots, Ulster Scots, Gaelic, Cornish, etc. Other languages that have some national and or official status within the United Kingdom. Even more complicated and interesting is the case of South Africa, with 48 million people. English is one of many official languages, and certainly not the most numerous first language. Nigeria, 148 million. Other languages are in existence alongside English. Pakistan, 172 million. I'm adding these up. These are very big numbers. And we know relatively little about what's happening with the status of English in those countries. And so on until you get to India with 1,147 million, with English as an official language alongside many other official languages. Now, obviously, if English is an official language in these countries, you cannot assume that everybody speaks it, uses it, or is able to master it to any degree. But the numbers are so huge that we have to make some inroad there. We can make a facile supposition. Let's say that in India, 10% of the population knows some English. I'm being generous perhaps, but knows some English. 10% of that population gives you 114 million. That's a lot more than the 60 or so million in the United Kingdom. To what extent can we say the United Kingdom has a right to own a language when there are more speakers of it in India? Many more, perhaps. Population of China, 1,321 million. English is not an official language, but there's a growing number of very competent speakers of English there. And even if that number were 1 to 2%, if it gave something like 13 to 20 million, it's still going to be as important as a number of speakers in Australia, for example. I note that Chinese colleagues have taken to communicating with each other in English, academics. It's faster and quicker to write, they tell me, and their English is excellent. The phenomenon is not as simple as adding up countries, obviously. Katchru's model here is useful. Here Katchru has a classical model of 3 circles. In the circles we have speakers who have English as their first language. And around that circle we have those countries where English has a status as a co-official language of some kind. And then there's a third circle around it of people who have some use of English, some recourse to English in the course, in doing whatever they do in their professional or personal activities. From Gradol, we can put rough numbers to that. The first circle might have 375 million, says Gradol. Around it, we could throw in another 375. That makes 750 million speakers in the first 2 circles. And then around that, who knows, perhaps another 750. The important points are, first, with continued globalization, which has the use of an international lingua franca, English, and increasing immigration from periphery to center. With globalization on those 2 levels, that third circle will increase in numerical importance and in competence in English. So there's a law of tendency here. And the second main point follows on from that. When you get more people using English as a second or third or occasional language than people use it as a first language, and when you get globalization increasing that disparity, it is quite false to think that L1 speakers, mother tongue speakers of the language, such as myself, have any right to control or ownership over that language. It is now out in the world for all to use, and its future will be common to all those speakers.